Looking at these images, who could ever imagine that one day, this father would brutally take the lives of the two angels he was carrying on his back and his wife, who was 15 weeks pregnant. 4-year-old Bella stood there, watching her father use a blanket to suffocate her younger sister, Cece, until she died. The little girl asked, "Daddy, is the same thing going to happen to me as Cece?" He answered yes, and then used a blanket to suffocate Bella as well. The very last words Bella said to her father were, "Daddy, please don't do that." This is the bone-chilling confession of Chris Watts, 33, living in Colorado, USA. The case sent shockwaves across the world because of the perpetrator's extreme cruelty. On the night of August 13, 2018, during an argument, Chris sat on top of his pregnant wife, Shanann, and strangled her to death, causing the fetus in her womb to almost be expelled. After that, he continued to murder his younger daughter, Cece, aged 3, right in front of the eyes of her older sister, Bella, aged 4. Bella was murdered immediately after. He took the bodies of his wife and children to the oil site where he worked to dispose of them. His wife, Shanann, was buried in a shallow grave wrapped in a sheet, while the bodies of the two little girls were dropped into crude oil tanks. The tank openings were only 20 centimeters wide. To make them fit, he had to break their collarbones and shove the dead bodies of his own daughters inside. Today, after researching the details and information from various sources, please join me in witnessing the process of how the police discovered this heartless perpetrator. Hello everyone, I am your narrator. On the morning of August 13, 2018, Officer Scott arrived at Chris Watts' house following a call from a woman named Nicole. Let's observe the case through the most authentic lens from the body cam of Officer Scott. This is Chris's house, the place where just a few hours earlier, he had murdered his wife Shanann and his two daughters, Bella and Cece. Currently, Chris is away hiding their bodies. This is Nicole and her son, Ben. Nicole just explained the reason why she called the police. She was very worried about her friend, Shanann. She knew Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant and was having mental health issues. This morning, Shanann had a doctor's appointment for a swimming lesson, but she couldn't be contacted. Her car was still in the garage, and the shoes Shanann wore every day were still in front of the door. There was no way to contact her. This made Nicole worry and reported to the police. Chris said he would be home in 5 minutes. At this moment, Ben was talking about how the neighbor's camera might have captured Shanann. Then Chris appeared. At this time, he had just returned from hiding the bodies of his wife and children. Let's look at his very first action after stepping out of the car. He opened the door on the other side of the car to take or put something inside. While everyone was worried that his wife and children might be dead inside the house, for a normal person, they would run into the house immediately and search through everything. I think he tried to tell himself to act normal, but that normalcy was not logical at all. He opened the car door again to do something. Surely at this time, Officer Scott also felt something was wrong with his husband. This is Nate, the neighbor with the security camera. After searching around the ground floor and the basement, they began to go upstairs. And here on the upper floor, we will see Chris's acting performance truly begin. There is a story Chris told when he was in prison. He said he carefully hid his wife's phone before taking the bodies to hide. Somehow, as soon as he returned and went upstairs, he saw the phone lying right by the stairs. He was truly startled and scared at this moment. Oh, so this is the story he wanted to paint. His wife took the blankets and went somewhere. Next will be another psychological detail happening in this case. Please pay attention to Nicole's hand. Clearly, she was just startled by Shanann's phone. It seems the wife who was just murdered wanted to send a signal to her friend. The phone battery was still on. Officer Scott knew people wouldn't turn off their phones while they were in the house. So the person who turned off the phone could be Chris. This made Chris a suspect. The officer began to ask a few more questions to clarify his suspicions. You can see Officer Scott's hand currently touching his face. We don't know exactly where he is touching. Usually if the hand is on the chin, he is considering the issue, but if the hand is covering the mouth, perhaps he thinks Chris is lying. People often cover their mouths when they don't like hearing what others are about to say. Did you see that smile? Look at the way Nicole is worried for her friend, and look at the calm appearance of Chris. Who could smile like that when their wife and children suddenly disappear? Nicole just talked about the neighbor's camera. Maybe there is some information about Shannon. But Chris rejected that idea. He thought it couldn't be seen. He acted very suspiciously. From the beginning until now, he couldn't offer any opinion. He used negative thoughts to reject reasonable opinions. For a normal person, when we lose someone, even a small idea that helps us find them, we will try it, but Chris currently does not. Officer Scott just suggested the school. Of course, the school is completely possible. Shannon could totally be taking the children to school and staying there. But once again, Chris rejected a very reasonable opinion. Did you see that look Nicole gave the officer after hearing the news from her son? Nicole looked at the officer, then turned to look at Chris. Her hand went to her face and she recoiled. Clearly, Nicole also saw that the most suspicious person currently is Chris. Chris said, "Okay, only that." Surely at this time he was truly trembling inside but trying to act normal. Like when he first appeared, trying to act calm, but it was not reasonable at all. He knew currently he was the #1 suspect. Immediately following is a very clever move by Officer Scott. He stepped back, held the radio, and began to test Chris's reaction. You are about to see the true emotional expression of Chris at this moment. Exactly, he was extremely afraid of being arrested. This face shows the officer's test was successful. Chris thought Officer Scott called someone to arrest him, so he was panicked like that. Now he began to bury himself in the phone to hide. The officer asked a few questions, he answered and then buried his face in the phone again. That's right, the swimming pool. People usually don't take phones when swimming, and August in America is hot like that, so going swimming is very reasonable. Let's see Chris's reaction to this idea. Once again, he rejected a great idea to help find his wife and children. He thought the weather was too hot to go swimming. At this time, perhaps he really wanted everyone to believe in the scene of his wife and children suddenly disappearing with the blanket. He was trying to find a way to make that scenario more reasonable. He suddenly went into the bedroom of the two spouses. Let's see what Chris is about to do. Wedding rings. So that's it. Chris's idea is that Shannon left the wedding ring and took the two children away. The way he put the ring on the tip of his finger, holding it out in front, did not look normal at all. Surely he wanted everyone to see clearly. The second disgusting smile. He said she wouldn't let him do the finances because he was horrible back in the day, but she just kind of handled it. While Shannon's best friend had a worried face from the beginning until now, Chris naturally smiled such a bright smile. Officer Scott probably also found that smile very surprising. It seems his feeling at this time was less afraid than when he was scared earlier. He thought he had just offered a few reasonable explanations for the disappearance of his wife and children. That smile was truly because he forgot to hold it back. At this point, Chris was certainly the biggest suspect of the police. Officer Scott had every reason to believe he was involved in the disappearance of his wife and children. But currently he didn't want to say it or arrest him at all. If he let him know, he would be silent and hire a lawyer. Then it would be difficult to have any more clues. Because truly at this time the most important thing was to find Shannon and the two little girls. Chris is truly a cold-blooded monster. He just committed a sickening act only a few hours ago, and now he acted like nothing ever happened. He was still trying to act to hope to escape his crime. I would like to close part 2 here. If you find it interesting or curious about what happened next, please press like and subscribe to the channel of Bat Saber so I have more motivation to make part 3. Remember to comment your opinion below. Thank you for watching until here. Goodbye and see you again. Looking at these images, who could ever imagine that one day, this father would brutally take the lives of the two angels he was carrying on his back and his wife, who was 15 weeks pregnant. 4-year-old Bella stood there, watching her father use a blanket to suffocate her younger sister, Cece, until she died. The little girl asked, "Daddy, is the same thing going to happen to me as Cece?" He answered yes, and then used a blanket to suffocate Bella as well. The very last words Bella said to her father were, "Daddy, please don't do that." This is the bone-chilling confession of Chris Watts, 33, living in Colorado, USA. The case sent shockwaves across the world because of the perpetrator's extreme cruelty. On the night of August 13, 2018, during an argument, Chris sat on top of his pregnant wife, Shanann, and strangled her to death, causing the fetus in her womb to almost be expelled. After that, he continued to murder his younger daughter, Cece, aged 3, right in front of the eyes of her older sister, Bella. He then murdered Bella immediately after. He took the bodies of his wife and children to the oil site where he worked to dispose of them. His wife, Shanann, was buried in a shallow grave wrapped in a sheet, while the bodies of the two little girls were dropped into crude oil tanks. The tank openings were only 20 centimeters wide. To make them fit, he had to break their collarbones and shove the dead bodies of his own daughters inside. Today, after researching the details from various sources, let's witness the process of how the police discovered this heartless perpetrator. On the morning of August 13, 2018, Officer Scott arrived at the Watts residence following a call from a woman named Nicole. Let's observe the case through the most authentic lens from the officer's body cam. This is the house where, just hours earlier, a triple murder took place. Chris is currently away, busy hiding the evidence of his crimes. Nicole, Shanann's close friend, is visibly terrified. She explained that Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant and had been struggling with her mental health lately. Shanann had a doctor's appointment and a swimming lesson that morning, but she vanished. Her car is still in the garage and her daily shoes are still by the door. There is no way to contact her, and for someone as active on social media as Shanann, this silence is deafening. Chris told the officer he would be home in 5 minutes. While waiting, Nicole's son, Ben, mentioned that the neighbor's security camera might have captured something. When Chris finally appeared, pay close attention to his very first action. He opened the passenger door of his truck to take or hide something. While any normal father would be sprinting into the house to find his missing family, Chris moved with a bizarre, calculated slowness. He tried to act normal, but his version of normal was completely illogical. He even opened the truck door a second time. Officer Scott definitely noticed something was off. Inside the house of lies, the search moved from the ground floor to the basement. When they headed upstairs, Chris's performance intensified. He once claimed in prison that he had carefully hidden Shanann's phone. Yet, as soon as he went upstairs with the officer, the phone was miraculously lying right by the stairs. You can see the moment he felt a flash of true fear. He immediately began spinning a narrative that his wife took the blankets and simply left. The signaling phone and psychological cues. Watch Nicole's reaction when the phone was found. She was startled, as if receiving a signal from her deceased friend. The phone was still on. The police know that people don't usually turn off their phones when they are just at home. Officer Scott's body language, touching his face and mouth, suggests he was already suspecting Chris of lying. Then there is the smile. Look at the contrast between Nicole's genuine grief and Chris's calm, almost amused demeanor. Who could smile while their pregnant wife and 2 toddlers are missing? Every time a helpful idea was suggested, checking the neighbor's camera or the school, Chris immediately shut it down. He used negative logic to dismiss every possibility of finding them. The radio test and the breaking point, Nicole's suspicion peaked. She recoiled from Chris after hearing more details. Officer Scott then performed a brilliant psychological test. He stepped back and spoke into his radio as if calling for reinforcements. Chris panicked. His face showed pure terror, not for his family but for himself. He began to bury his face in his phone to avoid eye contact, a classic defensive move. Even the simple suggestion of a swimming pool was met with a lie. Chris claimed it was too hot to swim, despite it being a perfect August day. He was desperate to make his disappearance story work, no matter how flimsy the excuses became.